Hi, my name is Isabel Amor and I am the Director for Activism at Fundación Iguales. In this class, we will talk about Daniel Zamudio, a young gay man lethally injured by an allegedly neo-Nazi gang in Santiago. We will also describe the anti-discrimination law accelerated by his murder and show why it is considered to be ineffective. Daniel Zamudio was an openly gay young man brutally attacked and tortured on March 2, 2012 in a public park in downtown Santiago, Chile. The perpetrators were 4 men that were drinking with him, but then started to beat him after he confessed being gay. He struggled for his life for over 3 weeks in a hospital until he finally died on March 27th. Due to the clear homophobic motivation and the brutality of the attack, which included swastika-like cuts, broken legs, a torn ear, and cigarette burns, the case caused huge public attention and was covered by the media from all over the world, becoming a symbol against homophobic violence. The 4 perpetrators were arrested by the police after hard evidence and several witnesses implicated them. In October 2013, they were found guilty of aggravated murder and condemned to sentences between 7 years and life imprisonment. The case was explicitly mentioned as a hate crime by the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights in the 2015 report to the Human Rights Council on violence based on sexual orientation. Sadly, this case took place within a larger regional context of ongoing LGBTI-based violence. The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights reported that between 2013 and 2014, nearly 600 killings were perpetrated on such grounds throughout the continent. More than a decade earlier, in 1998, a gay student named Matthew Shepard was tortured and murdered in the United States due to his sexual orientation. 11 years later, in 2009, the U.S. Congress passed the Matthew Shepard Act, also known as Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Act, a victim of racial violence in Texas. This law incorporated into the 1969 hate crime law the crimes committed on account of the victim's actual or perceived gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability, thus foreshadowing the Chilean anti-discrimination law that will be analyzed next. The crime catalyzed an Anti-Discrimination Act that had been introduced in 2005 by President Lagos, but was moving very slowly in Congress, partly due to lack of support among conservative members of Congress to the inclusion of the category of sexual orientation among those explicitly protected. In April 2012, following Zamudio's death, Piñera's administration announced they would accelerate the bill. In May, it was finally passed by both houses, and in July it was signed into law by the president, who named it Zamudio Law. The law defines arbitrary discrimination, gives a non-discrimination mandate to the executive branch, and introduces some changes in the judicial system. Arbitrary discrimination is defined as every distinction, exclusion, or restriction lacking reasonable justification made by the state or private agents that causes a deprivation, disruption, or threat in the legitimate exercise of fundamental rights established in the Constitution or in international human rights treaties ratified by Chile that are in force, particularly when based on grounds such as race or ethnicity, nationality, socio-economic status, language, ideology, or political opinion, religion or belief, association or participation in unions or lack thereof. Sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, age, political affiliation, personal appearance, and illness or disability. This is the first time that the concept of sexual orientation and gender identity were included in Chilean law. The Zamudio law gives a general mandate to the state administration bodies to develop and implement policies within the scope of their competence aimed at ensuring everybody, without any arbitrary discrimination, the enjoyment and exercise of their rights and freedoms. Its main component is the creation of a specific legal mechanism to restore the rule of law when an act of arbitrary discrimination is committed. It also modifies the criminal code by creating an aggravated responsibility that increases the penalty when the commission of a crime or participation in it is motivated by any of the categories mentioned in the definition. The law generally follows the recommendation of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights for states to include sexual orientation and gender identity in their anti-discrimination legislation. It also has had an important symbolic value, as the majority of Chileans now know that they are not allowed to discriminate, and this could change their attitudes towards discriminated groups in the long run. However, there is broad consensus across scholars and civil society groups that it is ineffective and that it focuses on sanctioning discrimination and not on preventing it, which should be its main goal. First, the definition of discrimination is not comprehensive enough, as structural, indirect, multiple, and aggravated discrimination are not mentioned. Regarding the general mandate to develop and implement policies, it is clearly insufficient as it only applies to the executive branch, excluding the judiciary and the Congress. In any case, it is too vague, as it does not mention who is in charge of developing and implementing those policies, what means, tools, or funds will be used for that purpose, what deadlines must be met, and who will supervise that it actually is done. It also does not include affirmative action that could help reverse the situation of impairment of historically discriminated groups. Concerning the judicial procedure, the law states that discrimination justified by the legitimate exercise of another fundamental right is considered reasonable. This establishes a hierarchy of rights in the abstract, instead of the judge weighing the different rights involved and doing the proportionality test in each particular case. It is not clear why lawmakers decided that those other fundamental rights were above equality and non-discrimination, which is paradoxically the object of this law. Besides, in the legal procedure, the burden of proof is on the victim. Although this is consistent with the constitutional presumption of innocence and the general rule of proof established by the Civil Code, in this type of law, one would have expected that it had been reversed. Why? Due to the difficulties of gathering evidence by the plaintiff, which in the end result in many trials closed for lack of evidence. In the case of labor protection, for instance, if there is evidence of violation of fundamental rights, the employer must explain the reasons for its behavior. Moreover, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights said that differences based on categories explicitly prohibited in human rights instruments should be subject to a particularly strict level of scrutiny, which is not the case here. Thank you for watching this class. Please visit mookchile.com.